Throughout the Avatar series, we've seen characters boosted, whether it be spiritual energy, full moons, Sozin's comet. Of this subset, which of them is the most legendary? Let's discuss. Hello one and all, and welcome to my Avatar tier list video series where I rank the strength and skill of every character in the Avatar series that we've seen in a direct fight, though sometimes it's not and sometimes it is. Today we are going to look at the most uniquely empowered characters of the franchise. If this is your first time seeing one of these videos ever, there is a playlist of all the other ones that I've done so far. Check those out first and then you can watch this one. Unless you want to watch in reverse order and you want to go from the low end to high, you can do that too. But if you're here looking for answers for this video, go ahead and continue watching. If you're just here because you want to get a quick answer of what the ranking I have for this tier is, there's a timestamp somewhere around here. You can skip to that. Otherwise, stick around and let's talk about the most legendary characters of the Avatar universe. To start, we had the likes of Toph in her prime, Pakku, Pali, and Combustion Man. And for those of you right now typing Sparky Sparky Boom Man, I'm going to make it very clear to you. In Book 3, Toph and Sokka and the gang agreed upon his name being Combustion Man, which was in the Runaway episode. First, let's discuss Toph in her prime. Of course, she has pretty hard counters from those who, don't touch the ground. Characters like Lahima or Zahir would be one of those kind of rock, paper, scissors matches for her, in which case they would be rock and she would be scissors. That doesn't make sense. Why would I say that? They would be paper and then she would be rock. Yeah, that makes more sense because rock covers paper. Anyway, but when it comes to pretty much anyone else, especially other earthbenders, Toph in her prime, not really gonna lose all that often. Now, of course, I keep saying Toph in her prime over and over to make that point. This, of course, is speculation. There is no foundation, no actual feats for Toph in her prime. It's just an assumption that most fans make and assumptions I make myself. Because we've seen where she was as a child and then we know where she ends up, we kind of can gauge where she is in the middle of that. Even when Toph was a kid, she discovered metal bending. She was already on par with Bumi, who is one of the greatest earthbenders of all time. Then when we see her as an elder, Sure, her physical abilities did atrophy a little bit, but she still was just as skilled. So we know that in her prime, when she was chief of police at Republic City, she had to be a badass. And while I usually won't discuss Toph in her prime in the context of a Versus series, because with Versus series, I try to stick to concrete feats and things that we know for sure are a thing. For instance, I can't do Prime Toph versus like Kuvira, or I can't do Prime Toph versus Iroh or something like that, But for this, more nebulous tier system, I feel more comfortable placing her in somewhere, and I think this is a good spot for her. And in terms of the whole history of Toph, in terms of her combative viability over the course of the series, I think I have Prime Toph at the top, then Child Toph, then Elder Toph. And the reason I have this is mostly on the back of Elder Toph not being as physically able as she was, especially when she was fighting Korra, and then she admits later, hey, don't tell Korra that I had back problems. And seeing that, especially against someone like Bumi, who was 112 years old at the time, who was in his, we can't know if that was his physical peak, but he was in great shape. We can see that, with Toph, for whatever reason, her physical ability is just kind of dwindled off. So I do think that she's the lowest of the Toph tier system, if we're doing a Toph tier system. So obviously Toph in her prime would be at the top, where she's in her middle age, where she has both experience on her side and still her physical viability. Then we have Pakku, who was admittedly kind of hard to place. And the reason for that, and it's the reason I was speaking about with Toph, is that we don't really have super concrete feats for him. Well, we do, it's just that he's always fighting against fodder, whether it was Full Moon Pakku when he was at the Northern Water Tribe facing off against the Fire Nation, during the finale, or it was him facing off of, admittedly, not complete fodder, but, Sozin, Comet, empowered firebenders during the series finale. Now, this is cool and all. This gives him, credit. We have to give him credit for that, especially the Sozin Comet feats, but these aren't notable characters. It's not like he's fighting Iroh. It's not like he's fighting Boomy. He's not fighting Ozai. Like those people, just we haven't seen what he's like fighting an actual person, except for Katara. Like that's the thing. But that was a version of Katara at the start of her waterbending career. So gotta take that with a grain of salt. Mostly I have Pakku here based on his reputation. I feel like anybody in the White Lotus would be in this tier because they all showcase that they can fight firebenders who were empowered by Sozin's comet, at least, you know, fodder level firebenders, not necessarily maybe the big boys. But I can't really put him higher because we haven't really seen anything from him. Now, if there's a comic that comes out and then we see like concrete feats of like how he's doing against like an Azula or something like that, then he can, you know, go up a little bit higher. But for now, I think he works here in this bottom class. Then with Pali and Combustion Man, I'll admit, I actually didn't even have them on the list, but thanks to my beta readers, and again, beta readers who are out there and they read my scripts before I release these things, thank you so much for that, because then I don't think about these sort of things. But yeah, I do think Pali and Combustion Man do deserve to be in this, you know, category. And the reason why they're here is based really on their sheer raw power. Any character in this universe would be hard pressed to defend them. As we saw when Combustion Man first showed up on the scene, he was taking on the entire team Avatar, who were super hard pressed to do anything against him. And it wasn't until Toph later, you know, realized that, hey, precision is what is his undoing. And then with, you know, Sokka and his boomerang, like, actually, if you look at it even with Pali, it seems like the only way to defeat them is either through distraction or precision. With Pali, it was, you know, the cage she had around her head because Suyin, you know, threw metal around her right before she combusted and she blew off her own head. And then with Combustion Man, it was him getting hit on his third eye and then internally combusting and blowing up. So yeah, I don't see too many characters who can really stand up to that, you know, that power, especially in the case of Pali, who has curved combustion bending. It's not just, you know, a straight shot. So yeah, they deserve to be here. So next up, we have Azula and Zuko as of Sozin's comet. So these are really kind of separate characters because Azula and Zuko will show up again in other lists, but this is them specifically under the power of Sozin's comet. And this is pretty simple. Like, it's pretty clear that from their fight during that time period, they were fighting on par. Now, some fans will actually say, hey, this is the only time that Zuko has fought on par with Azula, is because one, she was, you know, mentally distressed, and two, he had Sozin's comet empowering him. But I actually like to remind people about their fight at the Western Air Temple, and I think that's when we saw really Zuko and Azula starting to fight as equals. None of that ends up mattering, of course, because in the comic books, specifically the Smoke and Shadow arc, shows that Azula literally slaps Zuko at that point. But in terms of Sozin's comet itself, we have to factor in everything that happened during that time period, and that includes, you know, Azula being a little bit crazy and being kind of off her game, as Zuko said. So in this terms, I think that they would hold on the same class right here in tier 3. The reason I don't have them any higher is because I don't think that they would actually be able to fight some of these characters that I'm going to mention after this. And the reason for that mostly is because Sozin's comet is really just a boost. So you're taking your own skill and technique and just empowering that and extrapolating that via, you know, an external power source. So really the same way that I would list these characters without Sozin's comet is how I would rank them with it, more or less. I mean, there's some exceptions to that, but more or less that's how this is. That's how I'm measuring all of this, and the reason why they aren't a little bit higher. No. This guy keeps distracting. He just wants to be on camera, huh? He just wants to be on camera. So this class is based on the Avatar characters without the Avatar state at play, but still with them being able to use all 4 elements, and those characters who fight most on par with them that I thought wouldn't really go above them and don't go significantly below them. As we know is the case, when avatars generally enter the Avatar state, it becomes an instant win, but that is not really the case when they are outside of that state, period. So when they're just using the 4 elements normally, as we mostly see with Korra and Avatar Aang, before they actually, get to the finale periods or those like, really big moments where they, flash their eyes and everything. And the two, entities I've seen that have been able to contend with that sort of power, at least when on par to the point where they forced the avatars to go into an avatar state to be able to get the big win, are the two spirits, Hundun and Old Iron. Hundun is a bit obscure to most Avatar fans. That's mostly because he featured in a relatively small video game release for the Legend of Korra TV show, which takes place between seasons 2 and 3. Like most spirits, Hundun interacted with Korra in her past lives, and he had a grudge similar to Ko the Face Sealer had a grudge. I'm sure a lot of these spirits have grudges with the Avatar. So in the video game, he has abilities like teleportation, chi absorption, and dark energy, which is pretty hard to contend with. He was doing a very good job of pushing Korra to her limit when she's using her regular bending of 4 elements, forcing her to go into her avatar states and then having to use spirit bending to quell him and defeat that enemy. And then with Old Iron, going with this theme of having past lives, always being like, I had issues with you and now I have issues with you in this life. He fought with Avatar Yang Chen, who was the previous airbending Avatar, and in both cases when he fought with Yang Chen and then with Aang, it was a case of, hey, he was able to contend with them up until the Avatar state was enacted. But in terms of just the using of the 4 elements, they were pretty much on par. The real debate, I think, is with my third choice on this list, which is Jeong. Now, I feel like a lot of the fan base does not give this guy enough credit. We probably saw the single most impressive firebending feat from this guy in book 1 when he threw up that extremely large firewall without Sozin's comment. Like, we saw that same similar kind of thing used during Sozin's comment, but that's because the firebenders were being boosted. We saw him doing this in book 1 with the thought that he doesn't use firebending very much. And the fact that he's a White Lotus member should have us put him a little bit higher, kind of in that same ballpark as Pakku. But seeing what he's capable of without Sozin's comment, and then later on seeing what he's, doubly capable of with it, I think this guy needs a whole lot more credit. Now, I will admit that this is something that can be contended because he doesn't have any solid feats. Similar with Pakku, we haven't seen him fight anybody of significance. We've only seen him fight against grunts. But again, just visually, just seeing how impressive he is and just the mentality and the fear he has of firebending. And I think it's actually a healthy fear that he has of firebending, which I think makes him a great firebending master. Me personally give him more credit than most do. So I'm just putting that out there just for those of you who like giving me the side eye about Jeong. I'm having him here. But I will admit that the reason why, for instance, I don't have this character ever show up in the Versus series is because these are not solid feats. But in the context of like a tier system where it's kind of like just ranking people who are, in the same ballpark kind of a thing, I think it's easy for me to put him here. With Sozin, I'll admit, completely based on reputation, I don't really even think he could technically go here. But again, same thing that I've been saying over and over in this video, it's not a Versus series, so I don't need solid feats, really. Really, it's just kind of like a nebulous, they deserve to be in this kind of category. And with Sozin, obviously, we know his accomplishments. He was able to take over the complete west coast of the Earth Kingdom, almost took down Ba Sing Se, wiped out all the airbenders. Of course, we don't know who he faced directly, in what context all of this happened, but just based on reputation, this is more of like an honor placement, like, hey, okay, yeah, you did do that, let's put you in here, but not really having any real backing to it. The character that I debate with the most and should probably be on his own tier lower than this, but I just felt like it was kind of weird having this character by himself, is Aang, because this is the only Avatar we've seen under the boost of Sozin's comment, so obviously it's the strongest firebending Avatar we've ever seen. And as it said in the behind the scenes extras of Avatar, this is Aang at his most powerful when he had, in terms of firebending, because of Sozin's comment. But even with that, having that caveat there, knowing that he was boosted, he still was not really fighting Ozai all that well whenever it came to firebending. Now, if it came to the other elements, or of course, lightning redirection, yeah, he had the one up on him. But when it came to pure firebending prowess, Ozai was, kind of taking over. And I don't think that Aang, of the characters that I have on this list, he's definitely kind of like toting the line between like if he's on this class or the lower class. But still keeping that in mind, this is Avatar Aang with boosted firebending with all of his other elements. So I do think that if in the context of him fighting maybe one of the other avatars normal form without Sozin's Comet, and he did have Sozin's Comet, obviously, I would think he would have the advantage there, and that's the reason why I have them above the other avatars. Okay, this next one is a pretty significant class. It's pretty much all of our major grandmasters with Sozin's Comet. What I think are pretty much the most powerful people on this list, except for the next one. But the reason for this next one is because it'll make sense because these guys are kind of non-human. But I think it's pretty obvious with the Ozai and Iroh contention. I made a whole video about what I think that fight would look like if it was Iroh instead of Aang that fought the Fire Lord. It's clear that they are the two most powerful firebenders of the series. There is a little snippet about Azula surpassing them after this point within the comics, but in terms of just the series, the original Last Airbender series, these are, pretty much the de facto firebenders. And while there are people of the camps who think that, Ozai would be Iroh in the context of Sozin's Comet or vice versa, there seems to be that there's enough contention there that they do hold parity. I think most people can agree that there isn't a stomp one end or the other, but that they do have equality in skill and power mixed. And at the top of the tier, we have the Great Warring Spirits, Raava and Vaatu. Now, a lot of you guys were asking about these characters, especially when I was talking about like the most powerful, and then we were talking about the spirits. And there's reasons I gave for that in those other videos, but they are here at the top of this class. And also, I think I actually even had them on the low end of tier 1, but then I knew I was gonna do that spirit video with tier 1.5, and then I was like, okay, they don't really fit there, they don't fit there, but I'm like, I can put them here, even though it feels kind of awkward because obviously the theme of this class system, this tier ranking, was people who are kind of boosted by other things. But you know what, they're here, they're at the top of the legendary characters tier list. These are characters who were capable of destroying mountains, moving mountains, producing energy beams that could rip through the ground, and on top of it, they're kind of immortal and can't actually be destroyed. So I would say those are all pretty significant factors. Even against Avatar state empowered firebending, which is, relatively similar to Sozin's Comet firebending for like a regular firebender, they still couldn't be brought down. They've only ever been defeated by Avatar state avatars, or if it's that weird spirit bending, or it's that elemental ball that entraps. Well, and that's the thing too, you don't really kill these guys, you only can entrap them, and you can only kind of like make them faint. It's like Pokemon, but you can actually kill them. You can just put them down for a little while. The only way seemingly to disable them is with dark energy in the case of Vaatu against Raava, or with the, like I said, the elemental ball where you have against Vaatu, putting them in the tree. And outside an avatar who can enter the avatar state, there isn't much more that any other character can do. That includes waterbenders with the full moon, and that includes firebenders with Sozin's Comet, or any other boosts that we have out there, like airbenders with flight. None of that can really do much or match against what Raava and Vaatu can put out. Sure, there is the argument that some of these characters can definitely contend with Raava and Vaatu, but I don't think there's much of an argument that says that they can be put above them or overcome them in a definitive way. And that's the list, the legendary tier list. Benders and characters with very unique and specific circumstantial boost. Again, some of these characters, while on different classes, can defeat one another. Just because they're separated, it's due to other factors, not necessarily because this person defeats that person, because again, this is all a revolving game of rock, paper, scissors. It's not a game of transitive property, as it always is. I reiterate that every video, but I think I need to reinforce that because not enough people understand that. Transitive property does not work in these things. It's more of a game of rock, paper, scissors. So when negotiating this list, keep that in mind that yes, I do agree that some characters who are lower can beat people who are higher, but this is more of a general, hey, these people are kind of in the same ballpark. Next up, we'll look to the grandmasters of the Avatar franchise, and finally, we can do away with all these caveats and weirdness, so there's no more Sozin's comment, no more Avatar state, no more spirits. This is just straight up benders who can fight with the elements without any extra circumstances. But I do want to extend the question out to you. Who do you think are the most legendary characters of the Avatar universe? Do you agree with my list and its setup, or do you think that the order should be slightly changed? Let me know in the comments below. And as always, peace, love, and remember, be water, my friends.